Simon Pickard, and these are the models that I've been bringing here today.
Okay.
Like history, particularly.
So what is this one about?
This is actually the walls of Jericho, which
Right.
collapsed, mentioned in the Bible. So I wanted to represent the collapsing wall technique, and I knew that it was the only one I could do. So I did a bit of research, but actually the site of Jericho is completely destroyed. So there was very little to go on. So it's an interpretation, really, rather than an accurate model of that.
I really like the way that the walls are just collapsing, and you've captured that really, really well.
It's all just a variety of hinging and twisting pieces. The mixel joints are ideal for this sort of thing, but there's a good range of others you can use. I was very careful with the choices of faces for each of the figures as well. Perhaps my favourite was the fact that I managed to use the carol singer's face, which in the context suddenly looks a whole lot more shocked rather than singing. But, yeah, just to try and get that impression and the message across of the action and drama and what's going on.
And they're all falling down. Oh, this one's really not in a good way.
Well, yeah, none of them were by the end of the event.
Of course. So who are these three characters down here?
They're just representing the Israelites. So obviously we had Joshua, who was the leader of the Israelites at the time, and they'd marched around the walls for 7 days. Gave out a great shout, and then the walls came collapsing down. Although people don't necessarily want to attribute God's involvement in that. The site of Jericho itself was destroyed by a huge earthquake, so historically wise, it was an interesting subject to tackle.
And it's very well done. And then on this one, the next one is what? What can you tell me about this one?
It's a similar theme, but this is actually not recognisable by many people. It's quite fun listening to children convince their parents that it's a nativity because they spot the little baby in the stable.
Ah, yes.
But it's not your traditional nativity. It's much more accurate to the accounts written down in the Bible, which is why there are no wise men in this scene. And rather than it being a cave or a barn, it was much more likely to be these lean-to structures. It certainly wouldn't have been a barn because they didn't use those, but we know it was owned by an innkeeper, so this is an inn representative of the kind of architecture of that area, and just kind of showing the more accurate nature of that nativity story.
Very nice. Can you look inside the building, or is that just all
No,
closed
this
up?
is all solid built. There's no removable sections for this.
And moving on to this one, this is way more intricate. I can see that, especially for the landscape.
I do a lot of work with some friends of mine. We call ourselves Brick to the Past, and we do very large historical theme models. And this was a small part of my contribution to one of our big ones. We did it on the Vikings, and I was actually building some of the Anglo-Saxon areas. So this is an Anglo-Saxon woodcutter. We've actually got a little wood turner here where they would spin the wood around, which is very accurate to the type of woodworking they used to do at the Anglo-Saxon era. But the whole model, there was a huge forest, and we had Vikings coming up the river and all sorts as well.
Right, this is a nice tree. I mean, I'm always impressed by landscapes because I find them so hard to do.
I've done quite a lot of them now. I love it. I think you can have a really terrible model, but if you can put it in a decent sort of landscape setting, it brings it alive anyway.
Well, your hut isn't terrible.
Well, technically it is, but I was hoping for it to look like it was about to fall down. So.
And I like the brick-built swan, if it is a swan.
It is a swan. Yeah, it's good. No insult there. Yeah, I like brick-built animals. I think in some ways we've kind of lost a bit over the years with animals being released by Lego as a moulded structure. You kind of don't need to do it anymore. I've got a couple of mallard ducks, and there's some rabbits up in the corner as well.
So is brick-built animals a thing with Brick to the Past? Because I met Dan Harris at Discovery Bricks, and he also had lots of brick-built animals.
Yeah, well, we will do a whole range of themes, so obviously they don't always cover the types of animals we want.
Right.
And we've obviously got a huge range of techniques that we've developed over the years for doing that sort of thing. But we still use the moulded animals as well. They do blend in pretty nicely.
Moving on to this tiny little micro build.
Yeah, it's funny with the Brick to the Past guys. Obviously, we do these huge scales with millions of pieces, and people think that they're incredible, but they could never do that. But it's actually the small stuff that I think is the real challenging stuff to try and build something recognisable. This is actually Conwy Castle in Wales, and to get every connection to look like it is, you've got to be much more precise than you do when you're doing bigger stuff. So any aspiring builder should try and build in small scale first, because it's so much easier to translate up into the bigger things and put that detail into the bigger models than it is to go the other way.
And finally, this
Yeah, this
Scooby-Doo.
is a Scooby-Doo inspired model. I do a lot of work for Blocks magazine, and they actually asked me if I could build a setting for the characters to go in. And I didn't actually have the Scooby-Doo characters at the time, but once they came out, I had to buy all of the different sets to get the characters, and the very first show I was doing was that same day, so I just grabbed the boxes and left. And I was sat at the show having just set it all up with these extra Scooby-Doos, because you get one Scooby-Doo in every set. And I'm like, I've got 5 Scoobies. What am I going to do with these other 4? Because I'm never going to need them for anything else. So I actually hid all 5 of them in the model. So the children have great fun trying to figure out where they all are.
So there's
it's a
one
lot more
here.
challenging. There is one there. There's actually one behind that vampire. It's very hard to see
sadly, we
in
can't
the dark.
see it. There's not enough light to see. Oh, I can probably see his nose.
His nose.
And I'm so sorry, your ghost
Yes,
just
the
fell
ghost,
down.
yes. Very common piece to get knocked off if people are pointing at where they are. So you got one
Number
behind the
number
armour.
3 here.
Yeah. And then
4.
whether you can get the shot of him or not, I don't know, but he's right behind the staircase. And
I think I can just about see him.
the great thing is the children usually find them before the adults. They have a great fun teasing their parents over that.
So out of these 5, which is your favorite build?
These 5, it's tough.
Or the most challenging one you've had to do?
Well, I think each of them was a technique in its own right for challenge. I think probably the Scooby-Doo model, because there are so many different building techniques in there that kind of get underlooked, because I hope they've blended in very smoothly. So you've got a very gentle curved staircase, and you've got a range of different kind of doors, and even the landing that they're all walking along, some of it's sideways building, and then you've got smooth tiles underneath the balcony area as well, so it's not exposed understud.
Very nice. Well, thank you very much for your time and for showing me all your creations.